If you watch the anime series Yahare Ore no Sheishin Oregairu before, you probably have developed a liking into this cynical, cunning, yet surprisingly nice character with eyes that looks more dead than those living in concentration camps in Xinjiang. And if you haven't watched it yet, maybe you should click away because there are spoilers for all seasons. Oregairu Season 3 just ended recently, and I loved it. The fact that there is finally closure after 5 years of waiting made this the best anime I've watched this year. According to a poll done by CBR, Hikigaya Hachiman is ranked as the 13th most popular character in the entire anime genre. That is insane when you think of the hundreds of anime coming out every year for the past 20 years. So today I thought it would be a good idea to break down the things that makes Hachiman so likable, and the parts of him that might be detrimental for you if you try to imitate.
結論を言おう。青春を楽しむ愚か者ども。砕け散れ。
Firstly, he's extremely capable. Nobody likes a protagonist that doesn't excel at anything. Even Deku from My Hero Academia has something I call the hero instinct cliché, which made him brave enough to run into a villain to save his friend, when even All Might hesitated. The same applies to our protagonist Hachiman. Although he was a social reject that sucked at social interactions, he excelled at delivering results. From his interactions with Yukino, we find that he is a smart kid who does well in school. He was able to keep up with the nonsense the other school student council president was sprouting.
それだとイニシアティブが取れない。ステークホルダーとコンセンサスを得るにしても、ブレないマニフェストをはっきりサジェスチョンすることができるパートナーシップを。
He is so good at reading between the lines that he should really start a class teaching practical psychology 101. Most importantly, he was able to deliver results when people come to him for help time and time again, despite the fact that that caused a bigger problem later on, which I will bring up in the next point. The next point is that he is a flawed human being. Just like what Yukino's sister said, what's the fun in watching someone who can do things perfectly? Although Hachiman is capable of delivering results, his methods were so unorthodox and altruistic that it usually ends up with him taking all the blame or backlash, which he is perfectly fine with, but later on he realized that he was hurting the people that cared about him. There are already a lot of videos discussing this aspect of the anime, so I will not be covering it here. But that's one of the main things attractive about this character. He rants about the society and talks as if he was above all and wants nothing of it, yet he yearns for connections and help others out of compassion. He criticized Hayama's group as ingenuine for the fragile facade that keeps the group intact, yet he soon found himself in a similar situation as Hayama, but does nothing about it for a couple of episodes, at least until Yukino's sister called him out for it. He is hypocritical. And being as introspective as he is, he probably knows it too. That's why the show went on a dark tone for the majority of Oregairu Season 2 and Season 3. But maybe it's a blessing in disguise, as the long and tedious process of realization made it so satisfying but also tragic when the group finally comes to terms with the fact that there won't be a universally happy ending.
めっちゃ気持ち悪いこと言うけど単純にあれだ。俺はあいつと関わりがなくなるのが嫌で。
Thirdly, and this is the point that I wanted to stress about the most, antisocial is a very big trend these days. Antagonists like the Joker and Thanos that display high levels of antisocial behaviors are loved by the general public. By the way, can I just say how ironic it is that everyone is trying to look cool by hopping on the trend of antisocial, while performing socializing behavior by conforming to social norms. Anyway, Hachiman is an antisocial pragmatist. He developed his cynical personality from his traumatic childhood, where everyone he knows makes fun of him for trying to fit in, and after time he just gave up trying. But that's almost the same for every antagonist, right? The character experienced something traumatic and decided to change their way of thinking. The thing that makes this special for me is the fact that it's a Japanese anime. Now I know it sounds stupid, but let me explain. A lot of Japanese anime, especially the ones with high ratings, are usually heavily influenced by Japanese literature. And if you follow Japanese literature, you will know that conformity is a really big trait in Japanese society. So much so that it is named the shame society, where people shame others for not conforming. On a side note, there are researches done on how and why the Japanese committed the atrocities they did in World War II, and one of the main factors they discovered was the extremity of the Japanese soldiers conforming traits to their peers and superiors, that they are willing to do anything to avoid being shamed. Just a fun fact. Anyway, back to modern Japan. In a society like this, not conforming to social norms seemed more like a fantasy than a reality for Japanese people. Maybe that's also why the most popular literature in Japan tends to be antisocial and critical of their own society. One of the most popular literature, No Longer Human, written by Osamu Dazai, is a collection of depressing, cynical, nihilistic diary recording the life of a fictional guy called Oba. But you can basically read this book as the author's autobiography, as most of the stuff in this diary actually happened at some point in his own life. This book is gaining popularity now in the West, so you might have heard of it or even read it. In the book, the character finds himself living behind a facade and unable to connect with other people. He makes jokes to avoid people's suspicion of him not actually being a human. He calls himself disqualified as human or in the process of disqualifying, as he cannot understand how other people interact with each other. Because of his cynical worldview, he committed suicide multiple times in his life. What the book doesn't record is the author's final and successful suicide at the age of 38, right after he finished writing this book. Here I quote a paragraph from the book. "I am convinced that human life is filled with many pure, happy, serene examples of insincerity. Truly splendid of that kind of people deceiving one another without any wounds being inflicted. Of people who seem unaware even that they are deceiving one another." Now, does that remind you of someone? Yup, there are a lot of connections you can make from Osamu and Hachiman. The anime even made some references about No Longer Human in season 1. And according to my friend who knows much more about this anime than I do as he reads the novel, the author even admitted that the story was inspired by No Longer Human. For me, I'd like to think of Hikigaya Hachiman as Osamu Dazai in an alternate universe. A universe where Dazai found people that actually understood and cared about him. Just like Hachiman, Dazai met a lot of people, women, that cared for him when he was younger, but he felt as if no one truly understands him. On the other hand, Hachiman found people that were on the same boat as him. Yui was struggling to fit into a group, while Yukino was a know-it-all princess that struggles with meeting her family's expectations and cannot communicate well with others. And Hachiman wouldn't have had the opportunity to know all this if it weren't for him being forced into the volunteering club by his teacher. I think the life of Osamu Dazai is a tragic story of an introspective man trying to fit into the Japanese society, but feels himself excluded all the time, and the shame that followed his failure led him astray. And Oregairu demonstrated what can happen if people actually took the time to care for one another, stop ridiculing people who are struggling to fit in, and just open up to people. This is the thing that I think most people have missed. They were captivated by Hachiman's cynical worldview and adopted his philosophy. Now, don't get me wrong, Hachiman made some really good points against the high school politics in modern society. But how do you expect to get to know people if you never open up to them? If you show people your facade, people will notice that and show you their facade as well. If it wasn't for the teacher assigning this club to Hachiman, he would have never met the other two, and Hachiman will still be the loner that he was, unless he decided to open himself up at some point. Now, of course, it was very difficult for Hachiman to do so for what he's been through. That's why the support from all the other side characters were absolutely essential for the story to progress. Oregairu is a beautiful story of a man transforming from a cynical loner to a man bravely confronting his traumatic experience in search of something genuine. I certainly learned a lot from this anime, especially from Hachiman, but I hope people won't be tempted to live in Hachiman's worldview in the first season. In the last episode of season 3, after going through all the struggles, when the teacher recited his philosophy that he wrote in his essay back in season 1, he blushed and cringed from his past self. And I hope that after watching this video, you would feel the same too.
聞いたことないのか？青春とは嘘であり悪である。
うわ、今聞くと超恥ずかしい。
So yeah, that's the end. If you guys like this video, consider liking and subscribing to my channel. I usually make commentary videos on every Thursday. So see you guys next time and goodbye.